Rent in America was supposed to crash by now. Interest rates exploded, developers built millions of new apartments, the economy slowed down. And yet, rent is still near record highs. So here's the real question. If supply increased, if buyers disappeared, if affordability collapsed, why didn't rent fall? And more importantly, why might it never go down again? To understand that, you need to see what most people completely miss about how housing actually works in America. Because the problem isn't demand, it's not greedy landlords, it's not even inflation, it's something much deeper, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. In 2023, America built more apartments than at any time since the 1980s. Over 400,000 new multifamily units hit the market. That should have pushed rent down, right? That's basic economics. More supply, lower prices. Except housing doesn't work like basic economics, because supply isn't evenly distributed. Most of those new apartments were built in Austin, Phoenix, Nashville, Dallas, fast-growing cities. But in places like New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Boston, construction is suffocated by zoning laws, permit delays, local opposition. In some major cities, it can take 5 to 10 years just to get approval to build. By the time supply shows up, demand has already grown again. And here's the deeper issue. Even when new units get built, they're usually luxury units, because developers can't afford not to. Construction costs have doubled in the last decade. Labor is expensive, materials are expensive, land is insanely expensive. So when new supply enters the market, it's not affordable housing, it's $2,500 studios with rooftop pools, which means it doesn't lower rent for the average renter, it just creates a higher ceiling, and that ceiling slowly pulls everything upward. Here's something nobody talks about. In 2020 and 2021, millions of Americans locked in mortgage rates under 3%. 3%! Today, mortgage rates are closer to 7%. That changes everything. Let's do the math. A $400,000 home at 3% interest equals about $1,700 per month. The same house at 7% interest equals over $2,600 per month. That's nearly $900 more for the exact same house. So what happens? Homeowners with 3% mortgages refuse to sell. Why would they? Selling means giving up a historically cheap loan and replacing it with a brutally expensive one. This is called the lock-in effect, and it has frozen the housing market. Right now, over 60% of American homeowners have mortgage rates below 4%. They are financially handcuffed to their homes, not because they love the house, but because they love the loan. So inventory collapses, fewer homes go up for sale, buyers can't afford current rates, and suddenly, people who normally would buy are stuck renting. Demand for rentals increases, not because renters want to rent, but because they can't escape it. And here's the twist. High interest rates were supposed to cool housing. Instead, they redirected demand straight into the rental market, which pushes rent up. But this is only part of the story, because even if millions suddenly decided to build more housing, there's another invisible force preventing rent from dropping, and it has to do with who actually owns the properties now. For decades, rental properties in America were owned mostly by small landlords, local investors, retired couples, families with a few duplexes. But that's changing, quietly. Since the 2008 financial crisis, institutional investors have been buying homes at scale. Private equity firms, REITs, Wall Street-backed corporations. In 2022 alone, investors bought roughly 1 in every 5 homes sold in America. In some cities like Atlanta, Phoenix, and Charlotte, that number was closer to 1 in 3. And they aren't flipping these homes, they're turning them into long-term rentals. Why? Because residential rent is one of the most stable cash flows in the country. People might cancel Netflix, they might stop traveling, but they will always prioritize rent. For institutional money, that's gold. Now, here's where it gets important. Large corporate owners don't behave like small landlords. They use pricing, algorithms, data models, Revenue optimization software. Some systems literally analyze local vacancies, competitor pricing, demand elasticity, household income trends, and then adjust rent in real time. It's not emotional, it's mathematical. And when large players control a significant share of supply, pricing becomes more synchronized, more disciplined, less reactive to short-term fluctuations, which means when rents go up, they stay up. And when demand softens, prices adjust slowly, very slowly. But even this isn't the core reason rent may never fall long-term, because the real engine sits underneath everything, inflation. But not the kind most people think about. Most people think inflation is temporary, a spike, a cycle, something that cools off. But housing doesn't work that way, because rent isn't just a price, it's part of the monetary system. Here's what most people miss. Housing makes up about 1/3 of the Consumer Price Index in the United States. That means rent doesn't just react to inflation, it helps create it. Now think about what happens when the government expands money supply. More dollars in the system, more liquidity, lower purchasing power. Hard assets like real estate absorb that excess liquidity. Over the past 25 years, the U.S. money supply has increased dramatically. Meanwhile, land is finite, zoning is restrictive, urban land is scarcer than ever. Construction costs rise with wages and materials, so even if inflation slows, the base cost of everything stays higher. Labor doesn't go backwards. Material costs rarely collapse long-term. Property taxes almost never decrease. Insurance premiums are rising rapidly. In states like Florida and California, property insurance costs have doubled in just a few years. Landlords don't absorb that permanently. It flows through to rent. And here's the key. Rent is sticky on the way down. When prices rise, it happens quickly. When prices should fall, leases lock rates in. Owners resist lowering income. Operating costs don't decrease, so rent plateaus but rarely resets, unless there is a severe economic crisis. And even then, after 2008, rents dipped briefly, then surged to new highs within a few years. Housing doesn't deflate, it stair-steps upward. And that leads to the final piece of this system, the part that makes the trend structurally persistent. America is entering a strange demographic phase. On one side, millions of baby boomers are staying in their homes longer. They're healthier, they're living longer, and most of them have ultra-low mortgage rates. They're not downsizing like previous generations, which means fewer homes return to the market. On the other side, millennials, the largest generation in U.S. history, are in their prime household formation years. They're getting married, having children, moving out. Even if some delay buying, they still need a place to live. Add immigration flows, add urban job concentration, add slower construction due to regulation and financing costs, and you get constant structural demand. Now combine everything: locked-in homeowners, institutional ownership, inflationary pressure, restricted supply, strong demographic demand. You don't have a bubble, you have a floor, and that floor keeps rising. Could rent pause? Yes. Could it flatten in oversupplied cities? Absolutely. But a nationwide long-term rent collapse? For that to happen, you would need mass unemployment, forced selling, major credit crisis, system-wide deleveraging. In other words, a recession big enough that falling rent wouldn't feel like good news. It would feel like economic disaster. And here's the uncomfortable truth. In a stable, growing economy with limited land and expanding money supply, rent doesn't structurally go down. It adjusts, it consolidates, then it climbs again. So next time someone says, "Just wait, rent is going to crash," ask them what mechanism would actually push it down permanently. Because when you understand the lock-in effect, institutional ownership, inflation mechanics, and demographic pressure, you realize something powerful. Rent in America isn't broken,
It's functioning exactly as the system designed it to. And unless that system changes, the trend probably won't either.